This is John Cola with OKRod.com. I have another exciting episode for you, and the title of this video is called Do You Need a Dehydrator, or actually any appliance to live on the raw foods diet? So how I want to answer this is first get into why I got into raw foods and how long I've been into raw foods. I got into raw foods about 18 years ago in 1995 because of a health condition, and I had to basically make some changes in my life to turn around my health so that I could live, because I literally was in the hospital. The doctors told me that I might not make it out alive, and that I could have a reoccurrence at any later date due to my complement immune deficiency, which is a chronically weak immune system. So since that time, I've lived on a 99.999% raw foods diet, and I'm not perfect. I have eaten cooked food since that time and all this kind of stuff. But I'm going to share my experiences with you on do you need a dehydrator and other equipment and appliances. And to sum it up, I'd absolutely say no. You do not need any appliances to eat a plant-based raw foods diet. All you need is the plants or the food. Much more important than any equipment that you would ever need or require. I mean, what you need to do to live on the plant-based raw diet is you need fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. And in my opinion, those should make up the majority of your diet, and they definitely make the majority of my diet up. I generally get most of my calories from fruit, actually, and smaller amounts of the vegetables and the fruits because they're just not as calorically dense, although they are much more nutrient dense. So I strive to get about 2 pounds of leafy greens in me each and every day. So while you just heard that you do not need these to live on a raw foods diet, they can be quite helpful, and depending on where you at, you might want to consider buying one or all three of these different items. Actually, I own all three of these different items, so I have a juicer, a blender, dehydrator, and a whole host of other kitchen paraphernalia that allows me to eat and process more fresh fruits and vegetables so I could get them into me instead of the compost bin. All right, John, so you just said you don't need any of these appliances to eat a raw foods diet, but what if you really want to get them? I mean, should I buy them? If I do want to buy them, what should I get first and what should I get last? I mean, which ones are the most beneficial for health and which are the not as good for health? And basically what I'm going to say is this. The two guys over here, the blender and the juicer, in my opinion, are significantly more beneficial to your health than the dehydrator. Now, of these two, which one is best? Well, I'm not going to reveal that in this video. That also depends on the specific situation. So be sure to check my other videos on YouTube, where I actually have a video, should I buy a juicer or a blender first? Where I say, should you buy a juicer or a blender first? And I also have a video comparing blending to juicing and the pros and cons of each one. That being said, I definitely encourage you guys to get a blender or juicer. I think they are much more beneficial than the dehydrator is. That being said, let's talk about the dehydration, because that is the title of this video. And how I want to start this off is basically tell you guys a story. I like to learn in life by real world experiences, and I'd like to just share my experiences with you. So when I got into raw foods in 1995, dehydration is a big part of many of the different raw food booklets and recipes, because we're all used to cooking our food in the oven. So we try to replace what we're used to doing, like cooking in the oven, with cooking in the dehydrator or dehydrating, because we're used to that thing that's crunchy and that's maybe even warm. And you kind of lose that in the whole raw foods thing, because things necessarily shouldn't be heated above 118 degrees or whatever temperature you want, and it should be mostly unprocessed, in my opinion. So with the dehydrator, when I got into raw foods, I bought one and I started using it. I started making these really cool recipes, pizzas, dehydrated nut burgers, and crackers, and cookies, and all this stuff. And it was really cool. And actually, I had bought my dehydrator on Craigslist at the time for like $50, and it was like a really old, like 20-year-old model, but it had an adjustable thermostat. So whatever dehydrator you get, you want to make sure you have an adjustable thermostat, because some dehydrators are preset at too hot of a temperature. So what happened was I used my 20-year-old dehydrator for a period of time, and then one day it just broke. And then I stopped using it. And guess what happened after I stopped using the dehydrator? I started eating more fresh fruits and vegetables, and guess what? I started feeling better and had more energy, and the diet was working even better for me than it was when I was using the dehydrator. So at that point, when the dehydrator broke, I pretty much just stopped dehydrating for a period of my raw foods career and figured, it's just not so good for me, and I just won't need to do it. And so I just was eating more fresh foods, including just whole fresh fruits and vegetables, and I was also using my juicer and blending them as well. So that'll share some of my experiences with it. And, nowadays you might say, John, do you use a dehydrator now? Well, I absolutely use a dehydrator. And the reason why I use a dehydrator is because I'm a gardener. I grow my own food. You can see my tree collards behind me, and there's so many tree collards in my garden here that I just can't possibly eat them all. As much as I'd like to eat salads out of them and juice them and even blend them into green smoothies, there's still more than I could eat. And what ends up happening is on the bottom of these plants here, you can see if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. They start turning yellow and they fall off. And then these have to go in my compost pile. So instead of that happening, I like to harvest my tree collards or any greens in my garden. I could dehydrate them plain into like a green powder, which then I could rehydrate with water and take on, trips when I go traveling on the airplane or whatnot. Also, I could actually dehydrate the kale into kale chips, bring that to raw food potlucks, or if I'm traveling, I like to enjoy the raw food kale chips sometimes. Even if I'm not traveling, just for a nice treat, I like some kale chips because that'll allow you to eat more leafy greens. And in my opinion, most people into raw foods don't eat enough leafy green vegetables, which are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, according to Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who wrote a really good book called Eat to Live, which I recommend you guys read if you haven't read it already. In addition, in the summertime, I also grow a bunch of tomatoes and things like peppers, and I just can't possibly eat them all, so I like to dry or dehydrate my peppers and tomatoes in the dehydrator, and then I save them for the winter time when I don't have really good tomatoes or peppers. They're all being imported and they're just not quite as ripe as I'd like them. So what I do is I take my tomatoes and blend them up with some on the vine ripe Campari hothouse grown tomatoes to really get a nice rich tomato sauce or tomato dressing for my salads. And this way I'm adding the nutrient dense foods, because things that you grow in your garden and compost and rock dust are going to be more nutritious than anything you could buy in the grocery store when they're just adding 3 minerals, NPK, and I add 70 plus trace minerals to my soil so that the plants could be healthy, but more importantly so that they can absorb these minerals, and then when I eat the plants, I'll get those minerals into meat. So the other way I use the dehydrator nowadays is I eat a lot of coconuts in the form of coconut water. I love to drink coconut water. It's my favorite beverage, favorite water overall to consume. But the problem is I don't like to eat the meat. It's actually very high in fat, and while I do eat some coconut meat, I have far too much of it to do anything with, and I hate composting good food. So I'll take it out of the coconut, and actually I'll put it in the dehydrator to dehydrate it into coconut shreds, and the fresh coconut shreds will then store from, I don't know, maybe about 3 to 6 months. And yes, they will go rancid. And that's another benefit of the dehydrator, is that you'll be able to eat fresher foods. But we'll talk more about that in a second. So as a gardener and as somebody into raw foods, that's how I use my dehydrator nowadays. On an occasional time, I'll make like, a raw food pizza crust or some crackers or something like that, and I'll eat that with a meal. But, dehydrated foods do not make up the majority by any means, or even a large percentage of the foods I eat, because I'm eating my foods fresh. And I've learned that, one of the most important things on why a raw food diet works is because the foods you're eating fresh are all water rich. We are 65 to 75% water, and the foods that we eat, these bananas, are 75% water. And if we're not eating foods at least our water percentage, and that includes any dehydrated foods or any foods with lower water content than, 65, 75%, then that's going to take our water, steal our water from us. So, while that may be better than eating some highly processed and dehydrated foods, because the dehydrated foods that you make may still contain enzymes and more phytochemicals and phytonutrients than other industrial processed foods in higher temperatures, it's not as good as eating fresh. So let's get into a couple more scenarios about dehydrating. Say you're getting brand new into raw foods and you're used to eating, things that are crunchy, crackers and cookies and whatnot, and you want to get away from the junk foods in the packages. Should you buy a dehydrator? Well, you might want to consider it if you really want to substitute something in that's significantly more healthy than what you were doing before. That being said, even healthier than that would just be to cut up some jicama or some Jerusalem artichokes or some crunchy cabbage and chew on that for your crunch instead of something dehydrated that's going to basically end up dehydrating you. So, if you're already on a high water rich diet, including lots of fruits and vegetables, will a dehydrator benefit you? Probably not. It's probably going to take you in the wrong direction. So for that reason, I definitely would not, recommend purchasing it. Now, if you are still using a microwave, I would say definitely ditch your microwave and get a dehydrator, because a dehydrator, in my opinion, is probably one of the best ways to quote unquote cook, and the microwave by far is the worst. So actually, this dehydrator here is actually called the Sedona dehydrator, and this is specifically designed to fit in that space where your microwave was, right next to your oven. So that's pretty cool. Now, if you're wondering what kind of dehydrator to buy, if you are considering one, be sure to check my other videos on YouTube where I compare the Sedona to the Excalibur, which are the two main brands that I currently recommend at this time. I guess the final words of wisdom on dehydration is that, you know what, overall, I'm against dehydration because eating dehydrated foods will dehydrate you. That being said, you gotta be realistic and find out where you're at. You know, is it better to eat dehydrated bananas that you made in your own dehydrator, or bananas you buy in the bulk bins at the store, because you're going to eat them anyways? Well, I don't have to tell you guys, it's always better to do it yourself, because when you do it yourself, you can control specifically what's going into the food you're making. I mean, when you buy dehydrated bananas at the store, do they dip them in, potassium sorbate or sodium metabisulfate to preserve it? Do they actually put it in hot air tunnels that are heated at 140 degrees to dehydrate them faster, because they're not after the enzymes, they're after making the bananas stay fresh so that they don't go bad, in that case, it would definitely be a good thing. If you are currently eating like Snickers bars, would dehydrating bananas and eating them or making your own fruit leathers be way healthier? Absolutely, but I'd much rather you guys eat fresh bananas, than dehydrated stuff. But to sum this up, if the dehydrator will basically allow you to eat healthier, eat more fruits and vegetables, and yes, even if they're dehydrated because you wouldn't normally eat them, then it's a good thing. If it's going to cause you to eat more dehydrated foods instead of fresh foods, then in my opinion, it's a bad thing. And I can't really say anything more to that. You just need to figure out for yourself if the dehydrator will actually help you improve your diet or actually decrease your diet. For me, the dehydrator is a really good tool that I use to preserve my harvest that does allow me to eat higher quality foods in the wintertime that I normally would not have access to. Plus, it allows me to save money by dehydrating my own foods that I grew in my garden. Have you guys priced like sun-dried, tomatoes in the store lately? They're sometimes, $15, $20 a pound for good ones, and I grow my own tomatoes, dehydrate them at low temperature, so I'm assured they're raw. And my dehydrated tomatoes taste far better than anything that you could buy in the store. So, once again, I encourage you guys to get the dehydrator if it's going to improve your diet, and don't get it if it's going to take your diet down a notch and down a level and cause you to eat not as well as you had before. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, learning more about my thoughts on if you should buy a dehydrator or not, and if it even is necessary in raw foods. Once again, it's not necessary in a raw food diet. You could totally do it without it. It can make it more convenient and easy, especially when you're transitioning into raw foods. But even then, you might not need it, and I would rather you guys just, go eat more fresh foods instead. But I would say you want to definitely consider a blender or juicer before you even consider buying a dehydrator, in my opinion. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Once again, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time. And remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're the best.